Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for the Wednesday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast by Christopher Carter, our Steelers insider. We got a lot to talk about today. Arthur Smith, he's seemingly gone under the radar, I think, in a lot of media circles, but the fans are certainly upset with him after these last couple of games. Chris and I are going to talk through his performance as the Steelers are in their 4 losses in 6 games funk currently. We're also going to get into Chris's grades, talk a little bit about guys like DK Metcalf, Yaya Black filling in for Derrick Harmon this week, the young offensive line, and maybe get into a little bit of Jalen, Ramsey, Kyle Duggar, and how the Steelers are using their safeties right now. Before we do, we just want to remind you that the show is presented by FanDuel. We also want to thank our sponsor, Edgar, Snyder and Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. Insurance company doctors do. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar, Snyder and Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the work comp rights you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Chris, let's get into it here with Arthur Smith. How much blame does he deserve for the situation the Steelers find themselves in offensively at the moment? There's certainly other factors at play here. The QB injury situation, the past couple of weeks with Aaron Rodgers, but maybe going back even further, how he played against the Chargers. There's some personnel decisions that they've made more so off the field and in the offseason in terms of the guys that he has available to him, especially at wide receiver. There's been a lot of talk about Mike Tomlin being risk averse and that being, something that's coming from the top down rather than from Arthur Smith himself. But to what extent do you think the buck stops with him as a play caller?
I think that there's certainly a bit of strategy of it, but I also think it's become one of the bigger myths around the Steelers' passing attack over the past few years. Yes, there are plenty of quarterbacks who have avoided the middle of the field like a plague because that's just where you turn the ball over. And Mike Tomlin's kind of illuminated that in the past. Like when people have asked before, he talked about throw to the middle part of the field. That's where you're more likely to get picked off and for turnover-worthy plays to happen. And we're trying to give them isolated looks so that they create less turnovers, create less turnover opportunities. And people are thinking, well, that's limiting what you can do. That's thinking backwards. That's not being aggressive enough. But at the same time, you kind of see it works when you don't have the right quarterback to make it work. I mean, go look at Mason Rudolph's numbers with the Steelers, and then go look at what he did with the Titans when they let him throw over the middle part of the field. He threw like 7 interceptions and 5 touchdowns when targeting the middle part of the field, and was very bad. Go look at Russell Wilson when he left the Steelers. Go look at Justin Fields as he's left the Steelers. Kenny Pickett can't get a job. There are several players and several instances now where you can see the Steelers' plan for quarterbacks that are either not in their prime anymore or just aren't good yet at reading and attacking the field. I think it's given them their best opportunities to succeed. Meanwhile, I saw some people say, well, they don't let Aaron Rodgers throw over the middle of the field. They absolutely do. In fact, I broke down the numbers according to PFF and according to the others like sports information systems. 13 of Rodgers' 19 touchdowns have come down the middle of the field. 1,100 yards, which is 56% of his passing yards, come down the middle of the field. 52% of his completions come down the middle part of the field. And when targeting the middle part of the field, he has a passer rating of 120.3. And I think you can see in this game, when you peel back and you watch the all-22, sure, when you look at the passing charts, you don't see the routes that were designed for the middle part of the field. But on the deep ball that Mason Rudolph missed to Roman Wilson, he has DK Metcalf running a wide open slant in the middle, not the side, not the left, not the right, but the middle of the field. And he doesn't even throw it his way. And it'd be one thing if it was like in between 2 defenders, he's trying to, but this was, you cannot tell me that Mike Tomlin says, hey, Mason Rudolph, I know that's our number 1 wide receiver, and I know he's a really big playmaker. We're paying him a whole absurd amount of money, but don't throw it to him if he's wide open in the middle part of the field. You have to see it. And some guys just aren't good at seeing the field. I argued this when Kenny Pickett was struggling, and I said that's his biggest problem. People pushed back against it until time kind of showed, oh, no, that is a big problem. Mason Rudolph, this is why he's a backup. This is more about protecting helping these quarterbacks protect themselves against making crucial mistakes that cost them and cost the team. And that's where this comes from. It's not some grand scheme that's just like old and outdated. They are trying to help their backup quarterbacks avoid crucial mistakes that could bury the team and bury them in their careers.
So how does Arthur Smith factor into the offensive issues for you? It sounds like, you're fine with the philosophy and the execution just wasn't there against the Bears and hasn't been, I think we all know Aaron Rodgers played his worst game possibly as a professional against the Chargers a couple of weeks ago. Is it more of an execution problem for you, or is there a level of blame for Arthur Smith?
I mean, certainly there's always things you could call better. There's certainly some routes you could do different better here. But like I broke it down with the game against the Chargers. I mean, there were plenty of wide open guys. Kenneth Gainwell was wide open like almost every third down play. And I know some people were like, put Jalen Warren. And I'm like, the reason Jalen Warren is not going in on third down is because no one can cover Kenneth Gainwell at the backfield right now. And in that game, Aaron Rodgers wasn't seeing the field. And I think part of that was he got rattled. And I said this in my post-game grades. I think that first set of pressures that he got from Khalil Mack and company kind of rattled him a little bit, which is why I thought it was disappointing to see Mason Rudolph, who's younger and can take those hits, not do as well when he was given a really good pocket on Sunday. I mean, the like you said, the offensive line, or I guess we haven't gotten to that point, but the offensive line only allowed 2 pressures from them in this game. And so, I think that there's sometimes it comes down to execution. And yeah, you know what? Arthur Smith can call things better. There's certainly adjustments that can be made and different things that can be run here and there. But I think there's also a point here we have to acknowledge that, there's plenty of times with where these guys are drawn up the right plays and they're just missed. And sometimes that's just it is what it is there. And I think that there has to be an honest acknowledgement of that. And there's a reason why certain guys are backups and certain guys aren't. And even when they're not backups, I mean, there was plenty of times Ben Roethlisberger wouldn't see the open guy. It's a hard thing to do. It is not an easy. I'm not saying this thing like, hey, Adam, you could have gone out there and done this, or I could have gone out there and done this. It's not that simple, no. But it is a thing where it's like, this is if you're the things that people are talking about, like why couldn't Mason Rudolph do this thing that Caleb Williams did? Well, Caleb Williams is a first overall pick that was heralded for like 3 years in college as the best thing coming out, the closest thing to Patrick Mahomes in college football at USC for years. And then you're wondering, why can't the Steelers' perpetual backup quarterback outduel him in situations? That's just not the right question. And again, you're not asking that question, but there's this. I think there's a misnomer. And so, how much does Arthur Smith take for blame? I think some of it, sure, but I thought a lot of what he designed worked. The pop passes, the blocking from DK Metcalf and Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington out in space. He is making it work. He made that offense, got that offense to score 21 points in that game, where they completed one pass beyond 10 yards the line of scrimmage. That's impressive. I could give him kudos for that. Now, could they get some more things working downfield? Sure, but again, you need the quarterback that's going to hit those. They were drawn up, just not taken.
Chris, I did want to ask you about the tempo and the pace of this offense as well, because whether it's been Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers, we have not seen a lot of urgency from this group. They were down 2 possessions. I think it was 14-14 left in the fourth quarter. The Steelers took 8 minutes off the remaining clock, ran 17 plays on that touchdown drive that pulled them within 3. And granted, sometimes you need 17 plays to score, and I don't know that I necessarily have a problem with the play count, but there did just seem to be a deliberateness with which they were going to the line and not really pushing the tempo much, and then they were kind of put in a situation late where they kind of had to be perfect to win the game, both forcing the 3 and outs, which to its credit the defense did, but then the offense had one good opportunity and then one kind of rushed 2-minute opportunity without any timeouts, and we saw that did not go well. So, do you have any concern that this Arthur Smith offense only seems to operate at one speed right now?
Well, no, because I think for most of the year they've been scoring with the least amount of time possession in the NFL. I think this might be the first time the Steelers have won time of possession all year by more than like 2 minutes. I think they won by 7 minutes or something like that in time of possession. So it hasn't been much of a thing. I didn't think that the 17 play drive was an issue because when they scored there, they kicked the ball back with 7:47 left on the clock. The Steelers defense gets them the ball back with 4:37 left on the clock. That's plenty of time to execute a drive there. They fall short there, but they get the ball back with a minute 12, no, minute 29, so I look at that and I say, like, man, like there's time to get things done there. That's not a bad situation there. The important thing is to get the touchdown. It's like that age old question, like, oh, did you score too fast? I often say, did you score? And they got a touchdown on that drive. If you rush it and you don't score, then we're not even talking about this. I don't have qualms about that. If that was the 4-minute drive and they ended up being out of time at the 50-yard line, that'd be a different story. But they were when they got the ball with 14 minutes, a 17 play, almost 8-minute drive, I thought was fine but again, when they got the ball back, there was 4.5 minutes left. That's more than enough time to run a 4-minute offense. And they would have had that if it weren't for a procedural penalty where, all Calvin Austin has to do is step up on the line of scrimmage. Mason Rudolph has them at the 50-yard line with, I think, like 3 minutes left in the game. So I don't think that was as much of the problem. I think that there are times this year where I think they've gone up tempo and it's worked. But I don't see that as a core issue. I think the biggest problem right now is they've had inconsistent reading of the field from the quarterback room for the past couple weeks. And I gave credit to Mason Rudolph for doing it against the Bengals, but he did not have a good game against the Bears. He misread the field, had badly placed throws. Aaron Rodgers, I thought, struggled to do that against the Chargers, where he was doing that very well for most of the season. And then you've had spots here and there where, the offensive line has been up and down at times, but they're trending upwards for the most part, and they're definitely trending upwards after this week. So like it's a mixed batch of things, but I think the bottom line is, I'm not too mad at this Steelers offense right now, and particularly because when I look at the standings right now, and I look at points per game, they're ranked 11th right now. So, and granted, they do have 3 defensive touchdowns in that mix, but I think if you took those out, maybe they dropped to 13th, 14th. That's with the Packers and the Buccaneers. I'm not mad at that too much right now. I think the bigger problem, if we're talking schematically, is it's a crux of what I was asking Mike Tomlin about on Tuesday. It's about the defense and the things that they're the way that they're asking their secondary to cover. Is it the best way for that unit to cover? I don't know that it is. I thought they solved that issue after the Packers game, but then it reared its ugly head again in this game.
Chris, I certainly can infer it. And again, I think there's a different conversation going on among people like us in the media and the fan base who are still upset with Arthur Smith. So I'm asking in that context more for the audience here.
Absolutely.
What's at stake for Arthur Smith in these next 6 games? Is he in any kind of danger in your mind? Does he have anything to prove to be back next season, as the Steelers offensive coordinator? Or, we can talk about the success they had earlier in the season for sure, but we're talking maybe more about these last 6 games and to what extent he's culpable for that. If we see more of the issues that we saw against the Chargers or at points against the Bears, is there going to be a conversation about Arthur Smith in your mind?
I think the conversation is more so, is he going to get hired away? I think that there's last year I heard rumors or rumblings that he was exploring interviews and like getting feelers about he wants to take another crack at head coaching in the NFL. And if he can come in and say, hey, in 2 years' time, I took an offense that on average ranked like 25th or worse in the 3 years leading up to me getting there. I made them 16th in scoring in my first year. And like, let's say this holds and they finish 11th, 12th in scoring the next year. Yeah, I can fix things even when I have Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and old man Aaron Rodgers. I think that might be the thing there. Honestly, I think that the Steelers might even say to Arthur Smith, like, hey, we like what you're doing here, because there is still a chance that Aaron Rodgers finishes this season with the Steelers, and let's say the Steelers go and get their franchise quarterback, but they're like, hey, we want this guy to learn for a year because he's young, and the Steelers see if Aaron Rodgers can come back. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers comes back if he has to learn a whole new offense. I think that he would come back if Arthur Smith is still around. So I don't think it's as much as forcing Arthur Smith out of town as much as he might go himself to go get another head coaching opportunity.
Yeah, I think some people are going to find that jarring to hear, but I don't disagree with you at all, Chris. On the whole, I think the results have been good. They've just been a little disjointed at times, which is why I think these last 6 games are going to be really interesting to see which part was more real for Arthur Smith. Was it the beginning, or has it been these interruptions here in the middle of the season? Chris, we're going to talk about your weekly grades post over on postgazette.com in the next segment, talk about DK Metcalf, Jalen, Ramsey, Kyle Duggar, the offensive line, and Yaya Black. Before we do, we want to thank another couple of sponsors here. Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci are Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys, standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers. They have over 85 years of experience. Visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to thank Olivia Numismatic Rarities. Do you have old gold or jewelry collecting dust? Turn it into instant cash safely and securely at Olivia Numismatic Rarities right here in Pittsburgh's Shadyside neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs, and O&R pays top dollar for your unwanted gold, silver, and coins. Stop by their Shadyside gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue or visit onrcoins.com to learn more. That's onrcoins.com, or give them a call at 412-900-COIN today. Before we get back to the show, also want to let you know that the Steelers are 3.5-point underdogs this week at home against the Buffalo Bills, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. So make sure you check them out. If you're looking to place a wager on the game, you can also check out the Steelers AFC North division odds or even their conference odds. So thanks to FanDuel. And now with that, we'll get back to the show. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner, joined by Christopher Carter. We're talking Steelers grades for the loss against the Bears. Chris, you have your post up at post-gazette.com. I also worked on my PFF grades post. I kind of go maybe a little more analytics-based route. Chris looks at the film, the All-22, and goes more with the eye test. And then we chat here on Wednesdays about what we came up with together. So I wanted to start with DK Metcalf, Chris, because the interception that was thrown his direction on the second play of the game, I think probably principally was a bad decision by Mason Rudolph, on the play. However, it was discouraging to see how DK Metcalf just kind of got boxed out on that ball, the way that he was. And we know that he's not a great kind of combat catch guy. I looked up at one point. I think he only has 7 contested catches this season on 19 targets. George Pickens, the guy he is replacing, is first in the NFL with that. I think he has like 19 catches on 26 targets, something like that. He's tearing up those combat catches this season. So my question for you is DK Metcalf a great fit with what the Steelers want to do? I think he's a good wide receiver. I think there's a lot of places he could thrive, but it's not working now for some combination of reasons. Is it partially because they're wanting to throw these balls to him that he's not quite as suited for as George Pickens was a year ago?
Well, I think, one, George Pickens always has been a great combat catch guy. There was at one point, I think he was rated as the best combat catch guy in the NFL for like multiple years with the Steelers. So that's not nothing new there. And DK Metcalf was never a combat catch superstar. He could do it on occasion. Where DK Metcalf was going to give you something was he was going to run every route as hard as he can, as accurate as he can, to give you open receiving windows, which is something that George Pickens didn't do. When George Pickens knew he wasn't the first read on a play, he would jog. And that's where I think a lot of people would complain about things. But like on that play, I don't think it was it was just the decision that was wrong. DK Metcalf torched that guy. If the ball is thrown ahead of him, it's a touchdown. I mean, DK Metcalf is, if you go back and watch the L22, after his third or fourth step, the guy's like 2 yards behind him, and it's just like, give me the ball. And what happens? He gets downfield, it's slowed down, and then the guy gets to catch up to him, And then the guy, of course, then boxes him out because he's now in position to make the play. It was just a poorly thrown ball. And even if it was the idea was, hey, we're going for the back shoulder here, okay, then throw it sooner. When he beats him, that ball needs to be out faster. It needs to be out at a point where that cornerback that he is now beaten with his route can't catch up to him. So it was a great play by Deshaun Wright, no doubt. But Mason Rudolph set it up by the poor throw. And that's the thing that I think that is underusing DK Metcalf is that he is good at setting certain things up. He's not a super route runner, but he's a very good one. And he's a very athletic guy that he can route you up to get the deep ball. And the problem is Aaron Rodgers has been good with his deep ball, and Mason Rudolph, I thought, could have been good with his deep ball, but he missed on that one. There was another one where Roman Wilson beat his guy, and he threw the same poorly thrown ball, and Roman Wilson just happened to get back in time to knock it out of Deshaun Wright's hand for what would have been a second interception. And there was another deep ball where Roman Wilson, again, cooked his man. Mason Rudolph threw it like 5 yards out of bounds. And it's like, man, like that's 3 opportunities your guys won. You hit one of those. It's a different ball game. And so, and on that Roman Wilson deep ball that he threw 5 yards out of bounds, that was the play that DK Metcalf ran a slant and was wide open for like 10, 15, 20 yards, could have still been running. And so those are the things that I think that when we look at and we evaluate and we're going over the analytics, again, analytics are I use analytics. I use sports information systems. I use the hard stat. I just don't vibe with PFF grades because they're wildly inconsistent. But there are ways to use analytics and combine it with film and see like this isn't working. Like this guy is winning these routes. They're just not getting him the ball in these spots. And I think that's something that the Steelers need to do more of.
Yeah, and they don't seem to be accessing the things that DK Metcalf does well, and that makes me question: is it the fit? Can this be figured out? You certainly better figure it out with a 5-year contract. So we'll continue to monitor that situation moving forward. Chris, Kyle Duggar, Jalen, Ramsey both got bad grades for you from this game. I think they got the dreaded 2 skulls, not 3, but 2 skulls is pretty bad. How much of that was on the scheme, as you talked about on Monday's North Shore Drive, where they did a lot more of the single high safety than they've done probably for the last month? That seemed to be the big adjustment, right? As the pass defense got better after that first Bengals game, was they started doing more 2 high safety looks, and then they went away from that in this game. How much do you blame it on the scheme? And how much do you blame it on those guys individually? Because we know Patrick Queen, for example, was talking about the schematics, and that has kind of been the word of the week. Is it possible for both things to be true, that the scheme was bad, but that both safeties were also not great in the game execution-wise?
I mean, yeah, like, listen, at the end of the day, like, it's funny. Just the week ago, I was talking to Patrick Queen. He's like, we need to be good enough to win regardless of what scheme is called. And like he said that to me after, what was it, the Bengals game. He was like, he's like, that's where we need to be. And I think that in this game, they said, all right, the Bears love to run the ball, so we'll throw an extra safety in the box a little more often. They run double tight ends, so we'll have that safety also help against that a little bit more, which means we're going to need to have some single high safety looks. And I understand the logic in saying we're going to give this a shot this week. But I thought that the Steelers could have just done that with maybe some more man cover one and just pressing in that situation, or just having guys be more familiar with how to squeeze certain zones in certain spots. Like, for example, and the question that I asked Mike Tomlin that he kind of refused to answer, but because he's not going to give up, their playbook and say all the things that they do. But like the 25-yard DJ Moore touchdown, it's trips right, where you have 3 receivers to your right, 1 to your left. When the Steelers are in cover 3, and when that happens, cover 3 is 3 deep cover men. They have 3 deep zones, 1 in the middle, 1 on the left sideline, 1 on the right sideline. Well, the left wide receiver takes the left deep guy, obviously. The tight end running. So when you have trips right, it means you have 3 guys that can catch the ball to the right of the formation. So you had the tight end who runs just up the middle part of the field. Jalen Ramsey ran with him. You have the right sideline guy, usually the split end or the wide flanker. He runs up the right sideline on a 4 verts, and so you have your left sideline, your right sideline, the middle part of the field covered with the cover 3. But the problem is when you're cover 3 and there's that trips right, that guy that's in the slot in between the tight end and the wide receiver can just run right up the seam in between the middle guy and the right outside guy. And that's exactly what happened. And no one ran with him. It was an easy touchdown, simple read, something that they try to get done in basic football 101. And so, I asked Brandon Echols about that in the Steelers locker room on Monday. And he said, like, hey, you know what? They got us. He wouldn't delve into it, and neither would Mike Tomlin, because they're not going to open up the books for us. But that's a place where it's like, hey, obviously Jalen Ramsey is new to playing safety. Obviously Kyle Duggar, this is his 4th week with the Steelers. Put them in situations where they don't have to make as many checks as that. If that was Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think the Steelers would have been like, hey, get out of this, because this would be his defense that he's been with for 6 years, his defensive coordinator that him and Terrell Austin had a great relationship. But I think in those situations, you need to lend yourself to giving more help in the secondary right now. You need to trust this defensive front to win more often. Keanu Benton, Cam Hayward, Derrick Harmon, who now is out, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. TJ Watt, Nick Herb. You got to trust those guys to win more, especially against the run. If you do that and they do win more, it gives you the chance to say, hey, let's run more 2-deep look. Even if you give a 1-high shell where pre-snap it looks like a 1-high safety and the other safety's right here, but then at the snap of the ball, one safety goes here, the other safety goes here, and you got cover 2, or your mix of quarters coverage or cover 6, things like that. I think those things are very much better suited for what the Steelers have personnel-wise in their secondary. And on that note, I think that there is a schematic issue for the Steelers when they make the mistakes that they did Sunday.
Let's talk a little bit about the young offensive line. You mentioned at the top of the show, Chris, they only allowed 2 pressures themselves. Darnell Washington was faulted for the 1 sack, I think, that led to the fumble. I think there might have been another pressure or 2 given up by the running backs in pass protection, but offensive lineman proper, they had 1 QB hit and 1 hurry allowed, according to PFF. And it's not just like a 1-week thing. Their grades kind of flipped the switch probably between weeks 4 and 5, or the 4th and 5th game, however those fell in terms of the actual weeks of the season. And they've consistently been grading in the upper 60s, over in the 70s. Very solid, Chris. So how far is this group from being the strength that we've talked about them having the potential to be, considering how much Omar Khan has invested in Mason McCormick, Troy Fautanu, Broderick Jones, Zach Frazier, a bunch of early draft picks there. Are they becoming the strength that they're supposed to be?
As far as the offensive line, I think that they're getting a lot better at that. I think that they're figuring things out. They're running the ball better. They're protecting better. I think it's a shame that Broderick Jones is going to be out for this next game, because I thought this was one of his better performances. He had 0 pressures allowed. He was doing it, and they were able to run the ball on his side. I think they're starting to coalesce, and I asked Mike Tomlin about that, and he gave he gave a pretty good affirming answer that he likes the trajectory on. And listen, they're going to still have their up and down games. They're a young group, but I think overall they're getting it done. They're blocking the right ways. They're learning, and look, they'll get got by a really good pass rusher here and there. But I think as a unit, they're doing all right for themselves. And as a young unit, if this is the nucleus moving forward, I think they have a heck of a 4th round steal in Mason McCormick. I thought he played maybe his best game of the season on Sunday. Troy Fautanu, I thought has looked really good for most of the season. Zach Frazier has just been a steady presence of consistency. And Broderick Jones, I think, has been playing a lot better of late. And so for all 4 of those guys, and I'd say Amalu, not to dismiss him, but I thought he played a great game on Sunday. But I think they're figuring some things out, and that's really encouraging, because to me, I said before the season, like, hey, the Steelers are not all in. This is not a season where it's boom or bust, or Super Bowl or bust. This is a year where you need to develop a lot of your younger players. And we highlighted some of them on defense, Keanu Benton, Joey Porter Jr. But on offense, you needed this O-line to come together, and I think that they have done that for the most part.
Yeah, and there's lots of, I think, positive development signs. And we're going to get into another one here. Derrick Harmon, Yaya Black, they were both brought in to bulk up the defensive line. Hasn't always been easy. I think James Harrison did not like what he saw this week in particular. He called them soft up front. But there's also been moments where, I think Derrick Harmon has been a bright spot Yaya Black comes up with the fumble against the Bears. And now he's probably going to get a shot to play a lot of snaps this week against the Bills. What's your read on Yaya Black, I guess, specifically, and how he can replicate what Derrick Harmon has been doing to this point in the season, both as rookies?
Listen, I have a world of respect for James Harrison, the player, and I think he had an amazing career. And I mean, the man knows football. But I think he's doing a bit of an act when he does those rants on their shows. I think that there's times, man, where he's like, where he's just yelling, and I get it. You're trying to bring the energy and the fire because that gets the clicks on the social media. People like, yeah, well, I'm this mad too, and I hear that. But like, I would not call Derrick Harmon nor Yaya Black soft. I wouldn't say that to their faces. And what's funny is I think it'd be interesting for James Harrison to say that to them, because as tough as James Harrison is, he's still 5'11", and those guys are like 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds, like, and in their prime. So I don't know, man. I think that Yaya Black's plenty tough. I think Derrick Harmon's plenty tough. I also think that the Steelers, they faced a high-end running back in DeAndre Swift, and he had 8 carries for 15 yards. I don't know if they were being soft in limiting him to 1.9 yards per carry. But I think that they're showing good progress in general. I think the biggest problem for the Steelers in this game was they didn't get a lot of pressure. They needed to get more pressure. I think the most pressure they had on the day was TJ Watt with 2. Everyone else had 1 or less. And that's a problem. But I also think that was more in tune with the coverage problems, because Caleb Williams was able to drop back, first read, bang, get the ball out and be comfortable. And that needs to happen less. And when it wasn't happening less, like you go back to the Bengals game last week, they got 16 pressures on Joe Flacco, that week. You go back to the Chargers game, they got 27 pressures on Justin Herbig that game. So I think that's they in general have been able to turn it up. I think that this was just a bad instance of when it wasn't working for the Steelers. And I think part of it helps when you have the right coverage behind you, so that quarterbacks can't just get the ball out right away. But like, in other games this year, they had 32 pressures against the Browns in week 6. So this Steelers team, I think, has done a decent job for the most part at that. I think that calling Harmon and Black soft, I think there was a red zone possession, a goal line possession, where they did get pushed off the ball, and that was unfortunate. But by and large, I would not say that softness is their problem. I think that anticipating where certain blocks might come from, that might be part of the issue. But those guys will scrap every down if when they're given the opportunity.
Yeah, just to clarify, I don't think he specifically called those two soft. I think it
was okay.
To the front, yeah. But generally speaking, those guys were in there for a good chunk of snaps, so you could reasonably infer that he was talking at least partially about them. So, and yeah, you're very right about the pressure, Chris. I think it was only 8 pressures total for the entire game. One of them was the sack of TJ Watt. And I looked it up. It was their worst pass rushing grade as a team since week 7 of 2022. So certainly an outlier in terms of how bad it's been, even by the standards of the last handful of years, where they haven't quite been as sack focused and blitz focused as they were in some other years when TJ Watt was putting up huge numbers. Even adjusted for that kind of change the last couple of seasons, it wasn't good. So we will continue to monitor how that plays out in the week ahead. Chris, you'll be back this weekend after the holiday with Brian recording the North Shore Drive podcast. I'll be back on the post-game show with Paul Zeiss after Steelers-Bills, probably around like 7:30. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel for that. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And please consider checking out our written work over at post-gazette.com. Chris and I both refer to our grades posts. We're there every single week. So make sure you're checking that out, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.